Exactly. All right, nerds. Ow! He said moo. He said moo. Do they have cows in Canada? I know they have cheetahs.
What?
Don't ask. Okay.
So today we're going to be talking about the Sumo Setup.
Y'all ready to let the animal? Nah, that's not what I want to say.
All right, here we go. We're good.
Thanks for coming back, ladies and gentlemen. You ready to let the cow out of the pasture? Do some sumo work?
What are we talking about today?
Setup. Sumo setup.
Everything.
Everything.
Up to grabbing the bar.
Yep. Everything. Up to grabbing the bar with Mr. Sumo, Chris Bridgeford himself. So you're in for a treat.
What's up, everybody? So today we're going to be talking about sumo deadlift setup. We're going to go through quite a few things all the way up to grabbing the bar. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is the stance width for the lifter. So there's two key things that I look for when helping decide the stance width for a lifter. The stance that will allow them to get their hips as close to the bar as possible while maintaining a good balanced upright posture at lockout. A lot of issues that we see with sumo deadlifts, me included in the past, is that we have a stance that does not allow us to stand up at the top when we lock the weight out. We either fall backwards or we fall forwards. I have had a big issue with falling forwards in the past due to my stance width and my foot angle, which will go on later in the video. So we're going to start really, really simple here, and we're going to put Amber in a very generally acceptable stance width, which would be a vertical shin angle if we were watching from the front. So Amber's going to set up in her stance here, and she's going to adopt a stance that if we were to look at this from the front, her knee is going to track directly over the center of her ankle. Actually narrow this a little bit for me, and then kind of hinge down a little bit and drive your knees out. All right, so if you see here, she's pretty close to where she's going to be when she actually goes to initiate the lift. And we have from her knee right here, we have a straight line down to the center of her ankle. So this is going to be a pretty easy stance for a lot of people to adopt. And basically what we can do here is we can either further narrow her stance or we can widen it depending on the lifter's individual leverages, mobility, things like that. So just a good rule of thumb, the longer femurs a lifter will have, so from here to here, the longer a person has of that in relation to the length of their torso, the wider their stance is going to be. And then generally if somebody has a shorter femur and a longer torso, they're going to need a little bit more of a narrower stance. So,
and if you don't know if you have long, short, or what you need to do as an individual, coaching services are offered.
there you go. So if that's something that you're not able to figure out on your own, really good situation to work with a coach. So, all right, so we have stance width. Generally speaking, like I said, we see people that adopt too wide of a stance, and they will have issues with balancing at the top. They'll either fall forward or they'll fall backwards. So we want to have a stance where when Amber stands tall at lockout, she's going to have no issues with that. She's going to be able to complete the lift and not have issues with getting red lighted in competition. So
think of building a house.
Yeah,
that's a really good term to use if you're recording yourself from the front.
Shout out to Joe Sullivan.
Here.
I believe that he is the first person that
say
I've heard.
Yeah.
He's coined that term a lot, so thank you, Joe.
This should look like a house from the front.
Right. A lot of people focus on the start of the deadlift. I can do this at the start. I have this much speed off the floor, when really none of that matters if you can't complete the lift. We want to focus on the end of the lift, where we're at when we complete the lift. And if we can't even get there, then that means we're doing something incorrectly at the start of the lift, okay? I have amazing speed off the floor with sumo, but if I'm losing all my lifts at lockout, or as me and Brian were discussing earlier, I was showing him training videos from like 2018.
Yep.
All my lockout was non-existent.
It's like this. So you'll see it a lot. The lockout is when you can't get that extension, you're sitting here and you can't pull back. And guess what? That's red lights all day.
Yeah. So aspects of that we'll cover later in the video because that's different aspects. We gotta be careful here, falling down a rabbit hole. But I'm just using that as an example. If we're doing something incorrectly at the start, we're not even going to be able to finish the lift. So instead of focusing on I can do this, we want to focus on completing the lift and what we need to do at the beginning to get there. So first things first, as we said, stance width. We want a stance where we have a vertical shin angle from knee to ankle at the start, and depending on your individual leverages and mobility, you can widen or narrow from there. So we're going to go over to bar placement next. So
something you'll commonly see with sumo is people will set right up against the bar. Now, like with conventional, the problem arises when you go to wedge yourself into the bar. That will be in next week's video. You will kick the bar forward. That's going to tell you that you're too close to the bar. You're also going to end up way too over the bar as you set up. So this shin angle or this knee angle over the bar is really important. Now,
having that shin angle, having enough space here in between her leg and the bar to push her knees forward is going to allow for more knee flexion, right? So there's going to be more bend at her knee, which is going to allow for more help from her quads when she's pushing off the floor, where primarily people will have this tendency to sit back onto their heels, and they'll push completely off their heels, and they're getting no help from their quads. And that's a situation where we will see people like their hips will shoot up. So if she were to come down on the floor, grab the bar, sit back, and then pull, and her hips shoot up, then that is an issue where like we might be just purely pushing off her heels versus pushing over the midfoot.
You can see, watch her foot down here. You can see, watch, if she's pushing off her heels, watch right here.
Toes right up.
Toes come up.
And you always want those 3 points of contact. Every lift.
Yep.
Well, bench press, but that's not.
Yeah.
Sumo, or deadlift, squat, 3 points of contact, always.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we're kind of blending in bar placement and foot position here, but they go hand in hand. So we want the bar to be over our midfoot. This is going to make it a lot easier for us to just move this bar in a perfect straight line. That is how we complete lifts as efficiently as possible, is minimizing the range of motion on a lift relative to the person's position of their body, what they can, like how much they can do to perform the lift efficiently. So so having this space here is going to give Amber space to actually get her hips as close to the bar as possible, and to get her knees over the bar to get some more help from her quads off the floor. So
a lot of people think you also need to drag the bar up your shins. With sumo and creating that space, even with conventional, you shouldn't really have the bar dragging up your shins all the time necessarily. You'll see beginners, they'll have bruises, they'll have marks up down their shins, but
which is going to happen.
It is going to happen. And with sumo, more so it'll happen up your thighs, but that's why we create that space. So that space between our shin and the bar is going to allow the bar to move straight up, and then we lock out.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Whatever direction you move that bar in free space, the bar is going to want to move back in the direction that it came from. That is where you see issues with people when they are too close to the bar and they go to initiate the lift and the bar whips out in front of them, which is an issue I've had in the past. So avoid that issue and set up farther away from the bar. All right, so now we're going to move into foot and toe angle. We kind of touched on foot position a little bit here. Like the other lifts, squat and the conventional deadlift, we want to make sure that we maintain 3 good points of contact. There's a lot of emphasis here for Amber to drive the big toe into the floor. That's something we cue with all these lifts, driving the big toe into the floor, maintaining that rooting. So another big thing that we see with foot and toe angle is people have their feet flared out way too much. And this is an issue I've had in the past, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, maintaining good balance at lockout. I had my feet flared out so much that when I would go to stand up, I would fall forward like this.
You can either fall forward or fall backwards.
Right.
So you're capable of stabilizing yourself.
Yeah, think of it in this way. If your feet are so wide that there's some people do it, they're like this. If your foot's just in this direction, there's not much to stabilize there, so you can fall forward or back really easily. And with sumo, of course, you don't want your feet straight forward because you want to be able to open your hips a little bit. So just a slight angle here is still going to have your whole length of the foot. You're going to be able to stabilize on. Compared to right here, where somebody just came up and like touched my shoulder, I'd probably fall backwards completely and have zero balance.
This can go back to the squat videos that we did where we talked about rooting at the hips and actually creating torque. If our toes are too angled outwards, we have a really hard time creating that torque at the hip or driving our knees out.
You're sitting in that super externally rotated position already, so it's really hard to create that when you're already sitting in that extreme position. So if we angle the toes forward a little bit more, we can focus on creating that torque. And I'm sorry, I know a lot of people hate this cue, but screwing your feet into the floor a little bit and creating that torque and getting your glutes turned on as we lower ourselves to the bar. So
you can see the difference. I'm super angled outwards. I'm not going much anywhere at this point. But if I angle my toes a little bit more forward, you can see I get a lot more twisting at the hips, and my knees have a lot more room to travel. And that's going to allow me to root my feet into the ground and actually externally rotate at the hips and create that torque, which is then going to allow me to push the floor away at deadlift execution.
So next portion of the deadlift, of the sumo deadlift setup we're going to go over is lifter finding their hip height in the sumo deadlift for their start position. So common issue we see with this is people will squat down to the bar to grab the bar. Now, all we're doing here by doing this is we're increasing the range of motion of the lift. So if Amber were to grab the bar from here and try to pull, her hips are going to shoot up because there's no anchor point. Her hips are not in a position where she can anchor her body weight against the bar and leverage the bar off the floor. So we're just increasing the amount of time it's going to take to complete the lift, and Amber is going to put a lot of strain on unnecessary muscle groups in her body. So what we want to do here, similar to conventional, is we want to hinge to the bar. We want our hips as high as possible in relation to being as upright as possible. So there's a couple different ways to cue this. I like to tell people simply to squat down, or to squat down.
Sit into your quads.
Yep, you want to find your quads because quads are pretty important for the sumo deadlift. So I'll tell people to squat down until their hands pass their knees, and then from there we hinge to the bar. So squat down a little bit, and then when your hands pass your knees, generally speaking, from there we will hinge to the bar and we will set up from there. So that is a really, really easy way to find a good hip position. So squat till your hands pass the knee and then hinge from there. Now hinging means simply that we, layman's terms, we're gonna just push our butt back, right? We're not gonna drop our hips anymore. We're just gonna push our butt back. So imagine you're trying to touch the wall behind you with your ass. So I'm gonna have Amber do that. So she's gonna squat down until her hands pass her knees, and then from there, she's just gonna round over and she's gonna hinge her hips back. Pretty good anchor point for her hips. They're nice and high. She's not too bent over here, right? Going back to earlier, she has the bar over her midfoot. There's some space here, so she actually has space to push her hips forward into the bar. So her hips aren't too low, right? There's not a lot of strain. What's up?
Look at all the tension she's got.
Yeah.
That's good. See how she's shaking?
And this isn't terribly uncomfortable for you on your hips either, is it?
Nope.
Right? There's not a lot of strain on your adductors, on your groin, hip flexors.
They're on.
Yes. Yeah, so they're on, which is good, but there's not unnecessary strain. So, which we'll cover more aspects of that about people putting unnecessary strain on different areas, more so on execution. So, right. So really, really easy way to find hip height. Squat till your knees pass your hands, and then hinge from there, grab the bar. You likely have a good hip height. Another really easy way to do this, if you just want to look at old training videos of yours, is if you are a lifter who has an issue with your hips shooting up off the floor, really, really easy way to fix that is find where your hips rise to when you're in that position. You go to pull and your hips shoot up and then the bar leaves the floor. Look at where your hips are right when the bar is leaving the floor. That is likely a more efficient starting position for you, whether it's conventional or sumo. So again, just repeating that, find that point in the video where your hips shoot up and the bar is about to leave the floor, because it's likely going to be higher than where they're set, and that is going to be a good starting point for your hips.
All right, so now that we've got hinging to the bar covered, we're going to talk about grip width. A lot of the times we see people reaching for the bar and their grip is way too narrow. So what happens here is if my grip is too narrow, I can't utilize my lats to set my upper back and to pull my chest through. So I'm squeezing here. I don't have anywhere to go.
Good luck walking out.
Yeah, stand up with it. Another big, I mean, we're getting more into execution here, but showing you what it's going to look like at the end of the lift. All right, Amber's really rounded over here. Her shoulders are rounded forward. This is not a complete lift. This is a no lockout. She's not able to pull her shoulders back. She's not able to stand upright, and this is a consequence of setting your grip too narrow. So we're going to come back down here. Brian's gonna add something in here.
Yeah, go so back to the top, like with that narrow grip. Now, try and lock your seat. Like, you're still, that's even questionable. And that's trying as hard as you can.
And even if somebody has the ability to pull their shoulders back from this position, they're going to compensate by extending their lower back.
You can see
right? The shoulders aren't going to come back. They're going to overcompensate by leaning back. And likely what's going to happen in this scenario with heavy weight on the bar is our knees are going to come unlocked from leaning back so much. So we're going to come back down here, and we're going to have Amber adopt a shoulder width grip. Right? This is pretty standard. Shoulder width grip, conventional and sumo. So she's going to come down.
Just going to reach down from shoulder to bar.
Yep, things that we covered with conventional where we talk about the reverse shrug cueing or pits to pockets at the top, that all applies here for sumo as well, right? We want to lengthen our arms as much as possible, so she's going to push these shoulders down, flex her triceps, and then she's going to hinge to the bar, and she's going to create tension as soon as she grabs the bar. And we're going to stop there because we're not going to get into execution just yet. So you can see here that her grip is shoulder width apart. Now, something to cover here with mixed grip and sumo is something that you will see a lot is people have an issue with helicoptering the weight when they get to something heavy. Nope, the other way. You're going to turn this way, right? So really, really easy way to fix this, and I got this from Chris Duffin many years ago, is we're going to stagger our grip. This applies to mixed grip, not hook grip. We're going to stagger our underhand grip because if you think about it, when we have both of our hands doubled over, our grip is even. But if you were to switch your hand under and leave it in the same spot, we're now staggered. So we need to stagger our grip to actually make things even. So generally what I have lifters do here when they have this issue of helicoptering is we're just going to widen the underhand about 1 or 2 finger lengths. That's literally all it takes. Now her grip is actually even. It may look staggered, but anatomically her grip is even now. So she has even tension on each side of the bar, and she's not going to have an issue with that helicoptering anymore. So, very good. All right, guys, last portion today of sumo setup, kind of starting to tie into execution of the lift. We're going to make sure that we don't get into that. We're going to cover that next week. We're going to talk about bracing and tensioning into the bar. So, a little bit different than conventional because most of the time you're going to see a longer setup for somebody that has sumo, especially if they're also using a hook grip. It's not like conventional where you have a lot of people that are just going to come down and grab the bar and go. If you're doing that with sumo, just stop. Just stop. I don't speak in absolutes, but don't do that.
There's very few, but that's one of them.
There's very few. That's one of them. So, all right. So, with conventional, we talked about taking your breath and brace at the top versus the bottom, depending on how long you take to set up. So, generally speaking, a sumo setup is going to take longer, so we are going to take our breath at the bottom. Me personally, I don't even really focus on taking a breath. I focus on tensioning my obliques, and that's it. I don't make, when I do focus too much on breathing in, I get lightheaded in my setup. So it's not, to me, it's not necessary. You can take a short half of a breath or half of a brace, but focus more on tensioning your lats and your obliques. So something that I like to do to kind of help turn things on as I'm getting ready to lower myself to the bar is I'll simply stand here in my stance, and my training partners see me do this a lot, and I don't think anybody's ever asked why I do it, but I'll stand here and I'll dig my thumbs into my side, and before I go down, I'll simply just push my obliques into my thumbs, and then I'll come down and grab the bar. So for me, that's just turning on that cue. I'm getting ready to play my card, is what I like to call it. We have a lot of things here. We have our upper back, we have our obliques, we have our hips, our quads. These are all cards that we need to play in our setup. So when we see energy leaks or things like that in the execution of our lifts, it's because people are playing those cards too early. So I like to play these cards as I go through my setup. So I start with activating my lats and turning my lats on. And then as I get ready to lower myself to the bar, I'll play the card of turning on my obliques, and then I go down and grab the bar, and I'll play the card of tensioning my hips into the bar. So again, these are things that are going to go more into the execution of the lift itself, but I make sure that I have everything ready when I grab the bar. So that's kind of going back to talking about lowering yourself to the bar with intent. I have those things ready to play. So Amber here, we've gone through everything. We have our setup correct. Right? That's another aspect that we could cover. to help somebody get into that position is to exhale before we lower ourselves to the bar to make it easier to breathe in through our diaphragm. So exhale, draw your ribs down, arms long. We're gonna come to the bar. We're not gonna cover execution. We're simply covering the fact that Amber is gonna take a short half breath here, and then she's gonna tension into her obliques. She's gonna push her obliques out into her belt, and she's gonna begin to wedge into the bar. And you can see here by this, by Amber doing this, the bar is already floating off the bar because she is tensioning from her upper back, lats, obliques, hips, quads, all in that order. So that goes back to talking about playing your cards. So she's playing all those cards at the right time. She's tensioning where she should be at the right time. And you can see how well she's transferring tension because the bar is coming off the floor. So
Yeah, and I'm shaking.
Still
So
hold.
that's,
yeah.
a lot of tension gets created at that point.
Right. So it's really, really hard to cut off there because I really want to get into the execution. I want to talk more about wedging for the sumo deadlift, but that's
But you guys gotta wait.
that's going to be its own video.
You want to touch one thing on why you don't necessarily need a belt?
Yeah. So that's
Carries over into why you don't.
yeah. So that's everything I just talked about. That's why you can see Yuri Belk and other people. Other people they can pull. They can pull just fine without a belt. One, that's because you're going to be a lot more upright than a conventional deadlift, so there's a little less demand like on the lower back to help stabilize yourself while you're completing the lift. But I thought you were going to say something. You looked like you were getting ready to talk.
Are you
No,
sure?
I'm listening to you.
Okay.
You can tell how much she loves this.
Yeah. So there's a lot less demand on the lower back in a sumo deadlift, so that's generally why you will see people pull just fine without a belt. So yeah.
Don't give them too much.
Yeah, we're gonna stop there. I can
Stay
keep talking.
tuned.
So next week we're gonna get into actual execution of the sumo deadlift. I am gonna demonstrate a couple different variations of wedging into the bar that I've liked to use and that I've experimented with over the years that I haven't really talked about in very much detail, but we're gonna do that next week. So come back and give that a watch. Like, subscribe, share. These suggestions for everything that we do, and we appreciate you guys.
How about a little shameless plug for our boys, for John over at Phoebe Fight Me?
Oh yeah. Also, do me a huge favor. Go follow the page. Go follow the clothing company Phoebe Fight Me. John and Brian have been really good friends and supporters of mine throughout the years. They are a big reason why we have this facility right now and why we're able to shoot this content for you guys and to help you guys get better at your lifts. So go check out Feed Me Fight Me, buy some of their clothing.
They're veteran owned.
Yes, they're veteran owned, so you are contributing to a good cause when you do so. Come back next week.
Bye!